Good morning and Jai Hind. I'm Sathya Pulukuri, the Associate Editor of Indic Researchers Forum, and I'm your host for today's conference. On behalf of Indic Researchers Forum, I'm honored to welcome each one of you to this significant gathering on Bangladesh at Crossroads, Dhaka Spring, and regional security. As we gather to address these pressing issues, let me first share a brief overview of Indic Researchers Forum. Indic Researchers Forum is an independent think tank focusing on advancing Bharat's strategic interests through a rigorous research on geopolitics and security studies from a civilizational lens. Guided by principles of civilization, security, statesmanship, we address Bharat's complex security issues and foster resilient policies that uphold its cultural and strategic identity. And coming to the conference, the recent developments in Bangladesh, particularly the transition of leadership and the renewed influence of groups such as BNP and Jamaat-e-Islami, place the nation at a delicate juncture. These internal dynamics raise pertinent questions about the trajectory of Dhaka's policies, both domestic and foreign. We recognize that these shifts extend beyond Bangladesh's border and influence the strategic partnership between Dhaka and New Delhi, a long-standing foundation for regional stability. Bharat faces a growing intricate security landscape marked by ideological and extremist elements, some supported by transnational networks, heightening security concerns, especially along our northeastern border. Population movements across porous boundaries further add a layer of demographic and security complexities that demand a coordinated strategic approach. Compounding to these challenges, the Bay of Bengal is emerging as a focal point in the Indo Pacific. With external powers shaping strategic interests, these factors, alongside climate and economic powers, underscore the urge to need for the regional cohesion and collective security measures. A particularly urgent aspect of today's discussion is the plight of minority communities within Bangladesh, who continues to face significant challenges to their rights and security. The persecution of Hindu minorities is a matter of humanitarian concern and has presented a compelling and moral and ethical responsibility for a broader international community to address. Today's conference bring together thought leaders, policymakers, and practitioners to explore these pressing issues. Through constructive dialogue, the Indic Researchers Forum seeks to identify cooperative approach that strengthen regional security, protect vulnerable communities, and support stability across South Asia. Thank you for being here and contributing to this timely discussion. It is now my honor to introduce our esteemed speakers, beginning with our inaugural address. I have the honor of introducing Shri Tathagata Roy, an esteemed Indian politician and former governor of Tripura and Meghalaya. He has also served as president of Bharatiya Janata Party's West Bengal unit and was member of BJP's national executive. Shri Roy is an accomplished author and writer, contributing extensively to socio-political discourse in both English and Bengali. His published works include My People Uprooted, The Exodus of Hindu from East Pakistan and Bangladesh, and Shama Prasad Mukherjee, Life and Times. With this, I invite Sri Tadhagat Roy to deliver the special address. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very, very much for inviting me to this August forum on a subject which is dear to my heart. As a matter of fact, which is my mission, so to say, something for which I am living right now. You see, I am a person who was born in what is India now because my father used to work for the central government when I was born back in 1945. And I was born here in Kolkata. Since then, I have lived most of my life in Kolkata, except for the 5 years that I lived as governor elsewhere and for short stints here and there. But somehow or other, after hearing from my father as to what his ancestral land was like and reading up on it, I developed a then a very strong inclination towards that bit of land where there is literally more water than land, and which is a socio-politico-religious paradox in entire South Asia. Why I say socio-politico-religious paradox is that if you take the map of South Asia, that is prior to 1947, and if you move from west to east, then you will find as you move the proportion of Muslims go on reducing. So, for instance, in what is now known as Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and West Punjab, the proportion of Muslims was very high. Then, as you move into UP, it reduces. As you move into Bihar, it reduces. Suddenly, it jumps up in East Bengal. Now, why is that? Is the paradox, and it has foxed a lot of people. The reason that I had come to, the answer that I had come to after whatever little study I could manage to do is that sometime in the 6th, 7th, 8th centuries, when India was largely Buddhist, the Adi Shankaracharya, walking all the way from Kerala and traipsing all over India, had converted the whole of Buddhist India back into Sanatan Dharma. And he had the length and breadth of India came back to Sanatan Dharma. But he possibly could not enter East Bengal because it was a very inaccessible territory, mostly forested and full of watercourses. There are rivers as wide as 20 kilometers in what is now Bangladesh. So he must have left that place alone, and it remained Buddhist. And after that, as a result of onslaught of the Islamic juggernaut and also the coming of certain Islamic preachers, this area, which was largely Buddhist, it yielded to Islam. It yielded to Islam. A lot of people are surprised at this, but there is nothing surprising about it, because countries which were earlier Buddhist, like Afghanistan, then Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, then Iran, Xinjiang in China, these got converted into Islam very easily. But Sanatan Dharmic Hindu, India or Bharat, Sanatan Dharmic Bharat, that is, resisted it and remained Sanatani. That is the most plausible explanation that I have been able to find out. Now, coming back from the past to the present, what happened in this little bit of land? What happened is roughly this, that the Hindu minority in the whole of undivided Bengal, and it was not such a small minority. Hindus were about 45%, Muslims were about 55%. The Hindu minority was ahead of the Muslims in every possible way, all over the state, all over the province of British India. Then, at some point of time, the Muslims started raising their heads, mostly under the leadership of Nawab Salimullah of Dhaka, who was incidentally not a Bengali. They were Kashmiri emigres who had settled in the Dhaka area. And in fact, the Muslim League was established there. Then when Jinnah came in and strengthened his Muslim League, and the Muslim League started trying to be, and eventually succeeded in being the spokesperson or the forum for all of Indian Muslims. Naturally, East Bengal also submitted to it, and East Bengal also became, or rather, the whole of Bengal province became a Muslim League. That is, the Muslims became Muslim League and Hindus, of course, remained with Congress. I am talking about the early 1940s. Then there were these pulls and pushes, of Pakistan and certain horrible mistakes that the Congress made, which shortchanged the Hindus. I am particularly referring to the 1944 Gandhi Jinnah talks, which is a thing that is largely kept under wraps. And then the Great Calcutta killings of 1946 and the Noakhali killings of 1946, the same year. Noakhali killings were in October, Great Calcutta killings were in August. Now, starting from the Noakhali killings, which were the first organized onslaught on the Hindu minority, let me more or less take you through the sequence of events. Noakhali is a very little known district of East Bengal, today Bangladesh. It has been divided into 3 districts, that is Noakhali, Lakshmipur and Feni. And the district is very backward, largely forested, and about 80% Muslim, 20% Hindus. Now, there was a man called Ghulam Sarwar who didn't get a ticket for the election, either in 1946 from the Muslim League, and he decided to come up in the political hierarchy by targeting Hindus. So he started killing Hindus. First, he started spreading the word that these Hindus are sucking our blood, usual nonsense. And then he started calling the people to kill Hindus. Approximately some 5,000 Hindus were killed, and a very large number were forcibly converted. Now, Noakhali became famous throughout the world because Mohandas Gandhiji had traveled over there and he had tried to persuade the Hindus to come back to their half-burnt houses. Mind you, he didn't even for a second criticize what the Muslims did. It was an absolutely one-way street. The Muslims killed the Hindus. The Hindus could not retaliate because the Hindus were suffused with the Gandhian thinking. So, and in any case, they were a very small minority, about 20%. So that was that. And when Gandhi came to Noakhali and he tried to persuade the Hindus to return to their place, to their half-burnt houses, but the Hindus refused and they sort of dispersed all over the place. Some went to Tripura, some went to Assam, some went to West Bengal, and like that. West Bengal was quite far away. Still, well, a lot of them went to Tripura. Tripura at that time was a princely state, and the prince gave them refuge. Some went to Assam, and that's how it happened. Then there was partition, 1947, and with partition, the Hindus were faced with the choice. Some of the foresighted Hindus decided to go over to West Bengal because they could see that this was no country in which they could live. But some Hindus who particularly had property, the bulk of the property was with Hindus. These Hindus, they decided that, well, why not give it a shot? It just might happen that the Muslims will keep us down, but then let us live here. Why should we be alarmist? Let us go back to India and let us stay where we are, and then they stayed on. Then the Punjabi Muslims came from West Pakistan and they found that the cultural, educational, professional, these fields were totally dominated by Hindus. In fact, this is a thing about which anguish has been expressed by General Niazi in 1971, a book that he wrote called The Betrayal of East Pakistan. He said that everything is in the hands of Hindus. How can we expect this province of East Pakistan to remain in Pakistan? The implication was that the Hindus should be driven out, and the East Pakistan government started driving out Hindus. So in 1950, February and March, there was a horrible pogrom in East Pakistan. This was a pogrom, mind you. It was not a riot. It was a total one-way killing of Hindus. Particularly Dhaka and Barishal, these districts were affected. There is no statistic available as to how many Hindus were killed, how many were forcibly converted, how many were raped, and so on. But it is estimated that some 50,000 Hindus were killed. And a large number of them, some statistics are given in my book, My People Uprooted, or its Bengali version. Those who are interested can look it up. But the bulk of the Hindus, particularly the Hindu middle class, who had so far dominated the cultural field of East Pakistan, and the professions like the doctors, lawyers, teachers, small shopkeepers, accountants, engineers, who had dominated all these professions, they had decided that no, it is not possible for us to live in this country. So we must go over to West Bengal or wherever, rest of India, and we leave this place. But some people, some of them, particularly the lower down Hindus, so scheduled castes, a few scheduled tribes also, they were not in a position to come over to India because they had no employable skills. They were the farmers. There wasn't enough land in West Bengal. Then the fishermen. There wasn't enough water in West Bengal. So they decided to stay put. And today they form the bulk of the people, bulk of the Hindus who are resident in Bangladesh. There is of course still a small professional body or small body of professionals who are there in the large cities of Dhaka, Chittagong, Khulna, Rajshahi, and so on. But they are a very small number. The bulk of the people are the ones belonging to scheduled castes, who are mostly in the southern part of Bangladesh and who are there, who know that they have no other go. They have to be there. So they stayed on. The program which the East Pakistan government had launched, it was the government which had launched this program, mind you. This program slowly abated, and by April, Nehru and the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Liaquat Ali, signed a very pact which was very advantageous for Pakistan, but I must say which was stupid on the part of India, which was extremely detrimental to the interests of India. Why do I say so? Because the pact, it's called the Delhi Pact, which was signed on the 8th of April 1950. It said that each country, the refugees who had come over to India will go back to East Pakistan and they will be taken care of by the East Pakistan government. Now, it could not have been unknown to Nehru that the whole, he had his intelligence apparatus. It could not have been unknown to him that the whole of the program was government engineered, government sponsored, government financed. So you can imagine what amount of, I'm sorry to use the word over and over again about a first prime minister, but what amount of stupidity drove Jawaharlal Nehru to sign such a pact, we will never know. In fact, the two Bengali ministers in the central cabinet at that time, one was Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee, left the cabinet, later on formed the Bharatiya Jansangh, which later on became the BJP. That is all history. And the other person was K.C. Niyogi. They both resigned their ministerial berths. But Pakistan at that time, East Pakistan government at that time, adopted a slightly different policy. They figured, and quite rightly, that the way this reaction happened, there was some reaction in India. The way this reaction happened, this is not desirable from the point of view of Pakistan's interest. So henceforth, what we will do is we'll squeeze out the Hindus. Just as we squeeze toothpaste out of a tube, we'll squeeze out the Hindus. We'll make their employment impossible. We'll make it impossible for them to do any kind of trade and commerce. And that's the way we will squeeze out. So the squeezing out process went on. And in between, there were some big pogroms, like one that happened in 1964, when the Hazrat Bal, supposedly some hair of their prophet, was stolen from Kashmir, and it was eventually restored. But the jihadi rage had been raised, and the East Pakistani Muslims decided that it has got to be taken out on the Hindus over there, and there was a huge another pogrom of Hindus. And finally, there was 1971 pogrom in which Hindus and a few Muslims were also targeted. Roughly, it has been estimated that about 80% of the victims of the 1971 killings were Hindus, 20% were Muslims. Some of these killings were really gruesome. Like, for instance, the ones that took place in Jagannath Hall of Dhaka University. It is now called Jagannath University. The ones that took place in that place, they placed the inmates of the hostel on the parapet of the terrace, and then from the ground they brush fired them, and they enjoyed the army people, Pakistani army people. They enjoyed the boys falling down from the parapet like nine pins. So this is the way Pakistan managed it. Then it was independent Bangladesh, and independent Bangladesh survived until 1975, as we all know. Then Sheikh Mujib was assassinated. In the process of, in the political process that led to his assassination, a very unfortunate thing was that Sheikh Mujib had alienated all the people who had given him assistance, who were truly secular and who had run the country of Bangladesh while he was still incarcerated in a Pakistani jail in a place called Mianwali in Punjab. But the chief persons among them were Sayyid Nazrul Islam and Tajuddin Ahmed. Sayyid Nazrul Islam and Tajuddin Ahmed were imprisoned as soon as Sheikh Mujib was assassinated, and they were killed inside the jail. They were shot inside the jail. Then after that, eventually the rule of Ziaur Rahman came. Ziaur Rahman was a communal person. He started driving out the Hindus, making life miserable for the Hindus, launching small pogroms. Chittagong Hill Tracts is an area which is contiguous to Mizoram, our Mizoram. Chittagong Hill Tracts was not a good Muslim majority area. Even though it was given to Bangladesh or East Pakistan at the time of partition, there was this thing happened because of the award by a British barrister known as Sir Cyril Radcliffe. He gave Chittagong Hill Tracts to Bangladesh, to East Pakistan, because he argued that the access to Chittagong Hill Tracts is only through Chittagong district, which is Muslim majority. So although Chittagong Hill Tracts were Buddhist majority, it should be given to Pakistan. Now, Chittagong Hill Tracts remain Buddhist majority right through even the Pakistani period. But when Ziaur Rahman came to power, then Ziaur Rahman started pushing Muslims from the plains into the Chittagong Hill Tracts and displacing this Buddhist inhabitants who were the original inhabitants of that place. And gradually the Buddhists started facing persecution. A lot of them came to Tripura. Some of them went to Myanmar. And there was a repetition of the Pakistani times, although not to that extent. Then after that, it has been a story of, from time to time, this kind of conflagration against Hindus. There was martial law in Bangladesh, independent Bangladesh, for quite some times. For some time, it was headed by Ziaur Rahman. Then Ziaur Rahman was assassinated himself. Then came Irshad. He also had this thing, martial law. Then it was Sheikh Hasina's reign. During Sheikh Hasina's time, it is not that the pogroms were over. Pogroms continued, but in a much more muted way. And Sheikh Hasina was displaced in 2001. And after that, Khaleda Zia came to power. And as soon as Khaleda Zia came to power, once again the pogroms had started. And it went on until Sheikh Hasina came back in 2007 or 2008. Then it was a period of relative lull. I say relative lull for the Hindus because although there were conflagrations against Hindus like the ones that took place in a place called Nasir Nagar in my ancestral district of Brahmanbadia. My family came from that district, Brahmanbadia. There's a place called Nasir Nagar where a pogrom against Hindus was engineered. Then in 2021, that was in 2017. Then in 2021, there was a similar thing in Comilla where a copy of the Quran was thrust below the feet of Ma Durga. And after doing it, somebody raised a hue and cry that they have insulted the Quran, and then in the process, another 10 Hindus were killed. So this went on until the very recent ouster of Sheikh Hasina. Now Bangladesh is in a state of total anarchy. Nobody is governing Bangladesh. This man, this so-called Nobel laureate, peace Nobel laureate, and we all understand the importance of peace, the Peace Prize, Peace Nobel laureate Yunus, he doesn't know the first thing about politics. So he is acting like a football, getting kicked from this person to that person to the other person. And this is how it is now a sort of a bedlam. There are forces in it, largely Islamic forces, like the Jamaat-e Islami, Nizam-e Islami, and a whole lot of other polyglot groups. There is the BNP, of course, which has no leader. They have a leader called Fakhrul Islam Alamgir, Fakhrul Islam Alamgir, who is not much. So basically, it's a leaderless, anarchic country now, and it's going to plunge into more and more anarchy. Now, I have just given you a sort of rundown of whatever had happened from 1946 till the present day. Now, I'll tell you something which is extremely important in understanding Bangladesh. Normally, one would have expected that when the Hindus in Bangladesh were being persecuted in such a manner, then their first cousins, that is the Hindus of West Bengal, would raise their voice against it. I am not saying that they would stage counter riots or counter pogroms, but they would raise their voice against it. They would say that no, this is not proper, something has got to be done. They would try to push the Union central government to do something about it, take up the issue with Pakistan or Bangladesh or whatever. Strangely, they did nothing. I have often wondered, I have even pulled at my own hair to think, what is the reason for this strange behavior? The Jews were persecuted in Germany, in Central Europe. They still talk about it. They have launched museums. They have, we hear of Jewish pogrom, the Jewish Holocaust all the time. The Armenians were similarly persecuted in Turkey. A large number of them were killed. It's called the Armenian Holocaust. I know in the US, I have seen the Armenian emigres in US. They observe an Armenian Holocaust Day on a particular day. I think it is in April, 24th April or something. It has happened elsewhere also. The rest of the world knows about it. Say, for instance, the fight between Hutus and Tutsis in Africa. The rest of the world knows about it. Why does anybody not know about what went on in East Pakistan and Bangladesh? The reason is that their minds, these minds of the Bangladeshi Hindus, were so suffused. The West Bengali Hindus were so suffused, so totally overshadowed by Gandhian and Marxist illogic that they thought that this is sinful, this is not secular, this is not sufficiently intellectual to raise one's voice against the persecution of their blood brothers in Bangladesh or Pakistan. Mind you, many of them had relatives in Bangladesh, and many of them were themselves emigres, refugees from Bangladesh, or they were children of refugees from Bangladesh. But even then, they did not raise their voice. Instead, they kept on saying, "Oh, come on, we are all human beings. This is the work of a lot of hotheads. We mustn't talk about it. Let us talk about Cuba. Let us talk about Vietnam. Let us talk about Nicaragua, Venezuela, etc., etc., but not about how their first cousins were being persecuted in Bangladesh." And they had concocted a fabric of strange excuses, which I have recorded in my book, My People Uprooted. And in this book, I had enumerated the excuses also. One very standard excuse is, which is the communist excuse, that, "Oh, no, these are all economic struggles. This has got nothing to do with religion. Religion was just used as a ruse. These are all economic struggles." Another thing is, the sort of Gandhian or semi-Gandhian arguments like, "Oh, come on, let bygones be bygones." Then in some way they were also harmed. The Muslims were also persecuted. Muslims were never persecuted by Hindus. They were socially looked down upon. I'll concede that. They were socially looked down upon by Hindus. But is the remedy for that Hindu girls, Hindu women being raped, Hindu men being killed, and en masse forcible conversion? All these arguments are there. I'm not running through the entire gamut of arguments, but I'm merely saying that how these Bengali Hindus of East Pakistan, of West Bengal, who were all first cousins of the Hindus of East Bengal or East Pakistan or Bangladesh, how they obfuscated the issues, how they swept the whole thing under the carpet, I have found it revolting. And ever since I came to politics, in fact, this is one of the things that drove me into politics and into the Bharatiya Janata Party. It is not as if I'm entirely satisfied with the Bharatiya Janata Party, what they have done about it, but they are my only hope. And I have also, there is another line which I think I ought to bring before this August audience. It is this, that any action against the Bangladesh government or the earlier East Pakistan government had to be done by the central government. Now, it was not possible for the Senate. It would not have made any kind of sense for the central government to take up the issues when the central government, which consists of people from all over India, UPites, Punjabis, Gujaratis, Marathis, etc., they would have seen that the Hindus, the West Bengal Hindus, the very first cousins of the persecuted ones, they are not raising their voice, so what possibly there is nothing. So this is one of the things. Now, I think I've got a phone call from my friend Balakrishnan, Srinivasan Balakrishnan. Possibly he is signaling me to bring the whole thing to a conclusion. And in any case, I have said whatever I intended to say in this thing. I am extremely, extremely happy that I was given this opportunity to speak to this August gathering, particularly right in front of my eyes. I see very seasoned diplomats like Pankaj Saran Saab, who was Indian High Commissioner in Bangladesh, a whole lot of other people. I have personally interacted with Riva Ganguly a number of times and several other Indian High Commissioners. And generally, what I have said so far is the result of my study. I have visited Bangladesh some 5 times. Generally, what I have said so far is the result of my study. And with that, I conclude. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you so much, Sri Tathagata Roy, sir, for your thoughtful reflection on the historical and social roots of the challenges faced by Hindu community in Bangladesh. Your insights underscore the urgency and moral responsibility required in addressing these issues. It is now my privilege to introduce Ambassador Pankaj Saran, a distinguished diplomat with 4 decades of expertise in foreign, strategic, and national security affairs. Ambassador Saran has served as Bharat's ambassador to Russia, High Commissioner to Bangladesh, and as the head of Northern Division in the Ministry of External Affairs from 2018 to 2021. He served as a Deputy National Security Advisor for Strategic Affairs under Prime Minister Modi. He's currently the convener of NatStrat and also a member of National Security Advisory Board and a distinguished fellow at National Maritime Foundation. Ambassador Saran, we are honored to have you deliver the keynote address. Over to you, sir.
Namaskar and good morning, and thank you very much for inviting me to this online discussion on Bangladesh. I also would like to join Mr. Tathagata Roy in congratulating you for focusing on this subject, which is of great importance to India as a whole. So once again, my gratitude to you for inviting me. Uh, we have just heard a very, very eloquent address by Mr. Tathagat Roy, which has traced the entire history of this region of India, of the subcontinent. And there is a lot of material for thought in what he has said. And it brings back a lot of memories about what happened in the past and where we are today. And it places the whole current situation in a very good context. And in fact, when he traced, let us say, the evolution of Bangladesh after 1971, one of the main takeaways from that is the fact that what was East Pakistan and what is Bangladesh today, one of the defining characteristics of this part of the subcontinent has been its instability, its political instability. And what I would like to do, rather than trace the history which Mr. Roy has already done, is to share with all of you some of the more practical aspects of contemporary Bangladesh and the nature of how India and Bangladesh have interacted with each other in the past, what have been the lessons that we have drawn, and what is the likely implication of the events of 5th August and thereafter. So it will be more of a contemporary focus. I have spent myself many, many years in Bangladesh, both as a young diplomat and then as High Commissioner. I have traveled the entire country. I have visited all the border areas. I have dealt with the widest cross-section of Bangladeshi society. And I have seen the period from 1988, 1990, 89, 90, 91, the fall of Ershad, the elections of 91 in which Khalida Zia became Prime Minister, and then, of course, in 2012, when Sheikh Hasina was Prime Minister. So let me just make a few points about how I see the situation. I think Sheikh Hasina's rather sudden and exit and the collapse of her government has has created a situation where we are today, which I can describe as being unstable and full of uncertainty and unpredictable. I think this is a moment in which India needs to keep a close watch. And at this point, I feel there are more questions than answers about what is likely to happen inside Bangladesh. Clearly, the current situation and the current dispensation and the current constellation of forces is unlikely to remain as it is. There will be evolution, there will be more churning. The only question is what will be the time frame of these changes which might happen, whether we are looking at months or years or less. But what is clear is that there is we have a situation where there is in a sense a lack of legitimacy for the interim administration, whose only claim to legitimacy is the spirit of the students' movement and the fact that this was a popular uprising, and therefore they claim moral authority rather than any constitutional authority for the governance of Bangladesh at this point in time. But within this, there are multiple forces which are at play, and many of them do not see eye to eye on the current situation or the future direction of the country. Obviously, the key players involved are the students themselves, but even among the students, it is not a homogeneous population of students. There are different kinds of students who have participated in the demonstrations and who continue to participate in the political life. And we can have a much deeper discussion on the divisions among the students. Many of them are politically aligned. Many of them are not politically aligned. They are genuine students. But there is a lot of interplay among the student community. Then, of course, you have the political parties, which are basically the established political parties, which is the BNP and the Jatiyo Party. And as Mr. Roy said, they are in their own ways in the midst of leadership crisis. Both the BNP, which does not have any leader as such to lead the party, because we should remember that the BNP, as he said, and it's a good reminder, was born in the cantonment. It is an outcome of, a product of the martial law. So their faith and their commitment to democracy as a system of governance has remained suspect and will always remain suspect. You then have the Jatiyo Party, again, a cantonment-based party that was created by General Ershad. Again, commitment to democracy highly suspect, and again, leaderless at this point. So that leaves the third pillar of the political spectrum, which is the Jamaat-e-Islami and all the other Islamist parties, which are in different parts of the country. They have had different associations with governance at different points in time. They have either supported governments or been part of coalition governments. They have been underground. They have questioned the existence of Bangladesh. They have been tried. Their leaders have been tried for crimes against humanity uh, through judicial processes. And today, we have more than one Islamist party in Bangladesh, which goes beyond the Jamaat. There are other different political Islamist parties have who profess and who want to introduce the the Islamist ideals and teachings into the politics of Bangladesh. The third actor in the current situation is the military and the army. And we know the record of the military in terms of General Ziaur Rahman, General Ershad, um, and the role the army has played in these difficult moments. The militaries so far has been supportive of the interim government, but and continues to remain the most organized force in Bangladesh, and one could perhaps argue a factor of stability in the current situation. And the last, I would say, section of society which exists is the so-called civil society of Bangladesh, which consists of the intellectuals, the media, um, the scholars, um, writers, etc. They have never really been organized, but they seem to be now asserting themselves um, and their views. But at the bottom of this whole social reality of Bangladesh is the fact that today we have the emergence of a new generation of Bangladeshis who were born in the 1990s, in the 2000s. In fact, even I would say we can even talk about the teenagers who are today 15-year-olds or 18-year-olds, who are quintessentially Bangladeshi, who really have no memory of 1971 or before. And these are young Bangladeshis who are more, I would say, comfortable with their identity as Bangladeshis. And therefore, they are different from their parents and their grandparents, who were always conflicted about their identity between Islam, between Bengali identity, between Pakistani identity, etc. So, the nature and the future of Bangladesh is going to be decided by this huge, vast demographic section of Bangladeshi society whose views we actually still do not know very well. So this is on the overall kind of how we are faced. Uh, Secondly, what I think we should also take note of is that, as a country, Bangladesh is entitled to choose who they want to govern. They have to decide what form of government, who should be the leader, how the leader should be elected or not elected or appointed. This is squarely, in terms of as a sovereign country, it is their prerogative. What is a problem is when the Bangladeshis try to externalize their problems and lay the blame for their problems on India. That is something which does not stand to logic or to reason. And I would say that in the first few weeks, days and weeks of what happened after the 5th of August, the attacks on India and the blaming of India on what they perceived were the ills of the past was not justified. And to that extent, this government led by Mohammad Yunus began on a wrong footing. I have said in the past, in earlier occasions, that the internal developments of Bangladesh are what they are, but there is no justification for blaming India or to adopt an anti Indian attitude for events which are completely internal to Bangladesh and in which India had no role to play. Sheikh Hasina is a Bangladeshi. She was the leader of a political party. As a practicing, as a professional diplomat, not just for India, for any country, we all know that every country deals with the government of the day. If Sheikh Hasina was in power in Bangladesh, we had no choice but to deal with her. But more importantly, the question is, why should I be asked by the Bangladeshis to justify my relationship with Sheikh Hasina? For me, I have dealt with Ziaur Rahman, I have dealt with Khalida Zia, I have dealt with Ershad, and in the same manner, I dealt with Sheikh Hasina. Now, if Sheikh Hasina, in her own calculations, took a decision, a political decision, to develop good relations and close relations with India, why should India be held to blame for that? It is her decision. India did not force her to take any decision to develop good relations with India. It was her decision, and India reciprocated. And why should India not reciprocate when we have a leader in Bangladesh who wants to develop good, normal, healthy relations with India? And I would say that in the 15 years of her governance, there has been huge developments that have taken place in the bilateral relationship. And all of these developments have been for the benefit of both the Bangladeshis and the Indians. So this outburst that we saw in the days and the weeks after her removal against India made no sense. I can understand your anger against Sheikh Hasina and her government, but I cannot understand why this anger should be translated into anger against India. That is an important point to note. And I think to that extent, the interim government began on a wrong footing by bringing India into the internal affairs of Bangladesh. India made no statement. India kept quiet. But we were dragged into their internal problems, and there was a concerted attempt to make India a scapegoat in what happened. This is unacceptable. Now, on the relationship as a whole, the fact of the matter is that because of geography, history, culture, and everything else, it is in Bangladesh's interest to have a good and a close relationship with India. Some calls have been made in the euphoria after Sheikh Hasina's removal of basically cutting ties with India or asserting that we do not need India or that everything India has done has been detrimental or harmful to Bangladesh. The fact is that if you adopt this sentiment, this emotion as policy, and I hope they don't do it, but if there are hotheads there who actually believe in what they are saying and they want to convert this emotion and sentiment into policy, then they will do huge harm to Bangladesh because it goes against the flow of geography, history, culture. You cannot change geography. You cannot change the borders. You have to live together. And this means normal travel between countries, normal trade, normal investment, normal cultural links whether it is the richness of the Bengali language, whether it is the common culture. But if you are going to artificially isolate yourself and cut yourself and build walls, you will do great harm to yourself. And I think this is something we have to keep reminding the Bangladeshis, that you must learn a lesson from history. And also, you must learn a lesson from your West Pakistani counterparts. If today Pakistan is in a state of complete shambles and collapse, it coincides with the same period in which Pakistan chose to cut itself off from India. So the policy to cut yourself off from India coincided with the collapse of Pakistan. So the conclusion to draw is that if you integrate with India, you have a far better chance of success as an economy, and you can do much better as an economy, as Bangladesh did in the last 15, 20 years compared to Pakistan. So I hope that in as the dust settles down, this reality will dawn on the decision makers in Bangladesh. India has no desire to uh, interfere in Bangladesh, but at the same time, it is well known that India also has its red lines when it comes to Bangladesh. Our red lines are of different kinds, but some of them can be mentioned. The first is security, and security is a big word. This includes everything. It includes, uh, first and foremost, the fight against terrorism, against insurgency, against any export of radical and extremist ideology from Bangladesh into India. It includes the whole problem of migration, illegal migration. And this is something which for India, is extremely important. And we do not want to go back to the past where, because of the dangerous games being played by the earlier regimes in Dhaka, in Bangladesh, there were very serious security implications and impact on India in West Bengal, in the Northeast. So I don't think anyone in India today will accept a return to those days or to those strategies. So I think this is something we have to make very, very clear to Bangladesh, that while we respect your sovereignty and decisions to decide your own future internally, you must also keep in mind that nothing that happens inside Bangladesh should impact adversely India's security interests. I think that is very important. Um, the question of the Hindu minorities has been raised in Bangladesh. I used to visit a lot of the temples and Buddhist sites and meet a lot of people all across. Uh, you know, there is a tradition in Bangladesh of coexistence, of celebrating Durga Puja, of Poila Boishakh. All these things are part and parcel of contemporary Bangladeshi history, notwithstanding the terrible pogroms of the past, which led to the partition and subsequent developments. What we have to do as India is to keep an eye on the status of the minorities inside Bangladesh and to raise awareness about this matter all across the world. and to convey to the current authorities in Bangladesh that it is their responsibility. If the current authorities in Bangladesh have come to power on the grounds of human rights, of democracy, of freedom, of civil liberty, which they believe was denied under Sheikh Hasina, then logic demands that they also apply these same principles to those sections of their society who are the most oppressed and the most vulnerable, which are the Hindu minorities. And it is their duty to ensure that every section of Bangladesh, every individual in Bangladesh feels secure. So this is on the question of the Hindus. Now, going forward, I would say that one of the issues that we have to watch carefully is the economic situation in Bangladesh, because there is little doubt that the economy is under grave challenge, both in terms of their foreign exchange, their foreign trade, their manufacturing, their inflation, uh, liquidity, the status of the banking and financial sectors. And it has to be dealt with extremely carefully, because any economic problem in Bangladesh will naturally create more pressure on India, and we have to hope that the authorities in Bangladesh will focus on the real problems that face the country rather than targeting themselves on India, which is not going to be the solution for any of their problems. In fact, a more mature policy would be for them to reach out to India to continue the development of the relationship with India that began with Sheikh Hasina, and to understand that the imperative and the logic dictates a normal, friendly relationship with India rather than trying to artificially create problems with India. Uh, on the political side, there is talk about changing the constitution. There is talk about having elections. I would say these are discussions going on inside Dhaka. They are going to be very difficult, not easy. There are different views, but most importantly, what Bangladesh needs to do is to build and rebuild its institutions so that we can actually progress towards a more stable country, a more stable political order where there is greater accountability and transparency. But I'm not sure what kind of consensus they will be able to arrive at, both in terms of the timing of the election, the nature of or the amendments to the constitution, and also how they will approach the whole question of treating the Awami League as a political party. There are voices we are hearing talking about the banning of the Awami League, um, the banning of the students' wing, etc. I hope they don't go down that path, because uh, this is not going to create solve any problems. It will only create greater instability, and I think it would be in the interest of Bangladesh to have all political parties, all political forces uh, to be given equal opportunity to participate, if the idea is to build a new Bangladesh. But if we have to follow the same path of the past, then of course it's a different situation. But if those who are today in power and who have come on the back of popular sentiment and the desire for rebuilding a country and a nation and correcting the mistakes of the past, then they should not repeat the mistakes of the past. They will required, they will be required to show a huge amount of statesmanship and broad-mindedness so that what they say and what they do carries credibility about their true intentions. I hope they do not pursue and go down the path of political vendetta, of retribution, of revenge. That is only going to keep Bangladesh in the same cycle which they have lived with in the past. So I would like to end only on this note, but not without saying that as far as India is concerned, the relationship with Bangladesh is one of the most important we have in the neighborhood for obvious reasons. And the same applies for Bangladesh. And I hope that at some stage we can restore and go back to living normally uh, and not succumb to any temptations or to any political expediency which might disrupt the relationship and the normal interaction that the two countries should have. So I would like to stop here and then of course we can discuss more. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Saran, for your thorough analysis. Your reflections on practical evaluation of socio-political, economic, and security concerns of Bangladesh and relations with Bharat bring a great depth to our discussion today. And thank you so much. Our next keynote speaker is Dr. Arvind Gupta, Director of Vivekananda International Forum Foundation in New Delhi, a former Deputy National Security Advisor and Secretary of the National Security Council. Dr. Gupta has also served as the Director General of IDSA. An accomplished author, he has penned 5 books, including Opportunity for India in a Changing World, How India Manages its National Security, and Vasudeva Kutumbakam, the relevance of India's ancient thinking to contemporary strategic reality. Dr. Gupta's extensive experience makes him a leading authority on foreign policy and national security. And we are very honored to have you here today, sir. Over to you, Dr. Gupta.
Thank you very much, Satyaji. And I want to thank the Indic Researchers Group for organizing this conference and also inviting me to share my thoughts here. I think it's a very timely conference on a very timely issue. And we have had 2 excellent, very deep presentations from Tathagata Royji and Pankaj Saran. After those extensive and presentations, I don't have much to add except to say that I agree with almost everything that they have said. Mr. Pankaj Saran talked about India's security. He also talked about the internal situation and also talked about the uncertainties surrounding the future of Bangladesh. So where does this all leave us, and what should be India's approach, and particularly in the backdrop of the atrocities that are being committed against the minorities, Hindu minority there? I think that should be something that is of concern for us and that will be discussed in this seminar. But let me share a few views, a few points, make a few points for your consideration. The first is that today we have an unstable and hostile Bangladesh. They are talking about second independence. They are talking about a new constitution. They are talking about rebuilding Bangladesh. And all the anti-India forces that you could think of are now playing out. So we have a very serious situation on our borders. Of course, the historical background was covered very well with Tathagata. Uh, and what I could infer from what he said was that this instability, this attitude towards the minorities is nothing new. Very serious episodes have happened in the past, and I think we should expect more of it than less of it. So that's something that when our policymakers make their policies, should factor in the growing instability in the country and its impact on the region. Uh, we have to face the reality and then make our policies. Of course, the word genocide has been mentioned, atrocities has been mentioned, pogroms has been mentioned, and I think these words do describe the current situation quite well. And Indians should also, it must be bringing back the memories of 1971 when a genocide was taking place in that country. Now, we don't know where it will stop, how, or what shape it will take place. Probably it is not that levels of 1971. But the situation, if they try to remake Bangladesh and unable to remake Bangladesh as a democratic, as a country which is tolerant and which is has good relations with India, then we are in for a big trouble. So I think one thing we should do is we should keep all our options open here. And these should be, of course, calibrated. And right now, what perhaps we need to do is to watch the situation very carefully, as Pankaj said, but also have good assessments. Now, often what happens is that when such instability takes place, our assessments some tend to suffer because our contacts in the country or the people, they tend to diminish or tend to become only one-sided. So I think it's very important that we remain in touch with all sides uh, and also people within the country and outside, so that we have a good assessment of what is going on. Our second issue that I think is very important is the geopolitics. It was not just a student-led movement. Students have played a role, no doubt, but there is a background to this. And I think the role of external powers cannot be disregarded. And those external powers are still very active. And their views about India has fluctuated over decades. Uh, Today, we are a strategic partner. Tomorrow we may not be a strategic partner for some of them. So I think it's very important that we must make our own independent assessments and not get carried away by what is being dished out in the external media, particularly the Western media. Right now, the West is very much behind Yunus. He had a very successful and high-profile visit to the UN and to the US, where a lot of public functions were organized. So this should be a wake-up call for us that he enjoys today the support of the West. And the West is now, particularly the US, is very much today in the region, whether it is Bangladesh or is it whether it is Nepal. So now we are going to have elections in the United States shortly. Again, a very close race. We don't know what will be the outcome. And but the US policies, I think the US activism in the region, South Asian region, which has been growing, it's likely to deepen further. And today, Yunus is in that period where he enjoys their full support, and perhaps he will even get some financial support, etc., from some of these institutions. So that does not necessarily bode well for the Indian policy, but Indian policymakers will have to keep that in mind. And then we have Myanmar, which is in the throes of a civil war, which is a neighbor of both Bangladesh and of India. And there is a flow of refugees from Myanmar into India. So that's an additional factor for the Northeast, apart from what has happened in Bangladesh. So I think the situation in the Northeast and what has happened is happening in Manipur. All this is now again a new phase, and of which our security planners will have to keep in mind. Then there is developments in India-China relations. We know that uh, Bangladesh has very close relationship with China. Now we have a kind of a thaw in India-China relations due to the recent agreements on the border. But let us just treat it as a thaw and not as something which is going to be permanent. Nothing has changed in China's mindset or in China's strategy or in China's view of the world or China's view of the region. So I think China and Bangladesh together, China will also try to take advantage of the situation that is there. And that's another problem that is for India. Again, our security planners will have to keep that in mind. Now, there is also, we have invested considerably in the last few years, particularly during Sheikh Hasina's tenure in Bangladesh, whether it is connectivity, whether it is transit, building of infrastructure, and so many other things. And that relationship did flourish, and we had a very good period of 15 years. All that is going to change, but we still have our investments there, our equities there. So what do we do with that? That will be another factor that will have to be kept in mind while in policy making, because we have a substantial economic relationship which has benefited both sides. And so I think what should we do then, really? Now, we can, at this time, I mean, we can wait and watch the situation, but in the short term, first and foremost thing is to make sure that our borders we remain vigilant on our borders, because we have almost 4,000 kilometers of borders, very porous. It's been very, inflows of refugees, etc., has taken place. So we have to have a vigil on the border. As regards the minorities and Hindus are concerned, I think we need to step up pressure internationally and talk to other people, as was also said by Mr. Tathagata. I think we should document these things properly. And here, I think our civil society has to play a big role. The government has to follow certain, decorum, a certain maryada of diplomacy as to how they deal with this situation, because you're dealing with a sovereign country. But the role of the civil society in India is very big and huge. And I think a seminar like what is happening today is very useful, but we should have more discussions, more documentation, more awareness about the past history, etc. And also information as to what is happening in Bangladesh with the Hindus. We should try and get that. I mean, we have a huge experience of dealing with the refugees who came from Sri Lanka, from Tibet, and so many other places. So we know how to deal with this kind of a situation. But silence is not the answer. Why, at the same time, I think since it's a very sensitive issue, we have to be restrained in what we say, but at the same time, firm in what we say and what we do. So that's also, I think, important in how we deal with the situation. And finally, I think in the wait and watch mode that we are in, and we should be, and I think the government has played its cards very well. Let's, as Ambassador Pankaj Saran said, there's economic situation is pretty bad and it's going to get worse. They are in a downward spiral. And the political instability that is there and the talk of making a new constitution, etc., is only going to make the economic situation even worse. And as we have seen in the case of Sri Lanka, in the case of Maldives, Nepal, etc., the neighbors, despite whatever their politics is, when there is a situation, they come to India. And I think that is going to repeat. But it has not happened so far because there is, I think, this euphoria about the change and euphoria about the support, international support for so-called democracy, for this Nobel Prize winner, etc. But soon the reality will bite, and there will be an approach to India. And I think we should wait for that moment and then decide what we have to do. So India has multiple options. Bangladesh is very important neighbor. We There's no one single factor which decides all our policies. There are multiple factors which are political, economic, people to people, the minorities issues that was mentioned, the geopolitics, etc. So the policy which is going to be made has to take on board all these factors. So knee-jerk reactions need to be avoided, and I think, as was mentioned by perhaps Mr. Sathya Pulukuri, we need a coordinated and strategic approach on this. And we should not lose our calm or cool. But at the same time, I think this is the time to work out all our options, the toolkit, and see how we can deal with it. It's not a situation we have not dealt with earlier or in other parts of the region. Today, India is far better equipped, far better resourced, and we have a strong, determined leadership. And there is, I think, a consensus in the country about how to deal with our neighbors, which is that they should respect our red lines, and we will deal with them in a proper manner and in a helpful manner. But I think red lines are important. But these red lines need to be made clear. Very often we don't make those red lines clear because there's often not the consensus within the country on what are those red lines. But I think in Bangladesh case, last 15 years and of course last 50 years, we have enough experience. We are not in the phase of 80s or 90s. We are today in 2024 when India is looking to become a Viksit Bharat. India has huge capabilities, diplomatic capabilities, military capabilities, economic capabilities. So we can deal with the situation. So with those words, I want to thank you for a patient hearing. And back to you, Sathya.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gupta ji, for your special address. Your perspective on the geopolitical concerns with a hostile Bangladesh and critical need for Bharat's independent assessment of border and regional security is a timely wake-up call for all the strategic preparedness. And as we conclude this opening session, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to Sri Tathagata Roy ji, Ambassador Pankaj Saran ji, and Dr. Arvind Gupta ji for their insightful and nuanced, unique perspectives and their reflections on complex challenges, along with their emphasis on the vital role of civil society in addressing and bringing awareness into these issues, provide a thoughtful foundation for our discussion today. I also thank our esteemed attendees for joining us, and I look forward to a day of engaging and constructive dialogue. Let us proceed to our next session. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining.